Racism often hides behind polite handshakes and polished smiles in corporate halls, but inside a sleek Atlanta skyscraper, that hidden truth bursts into the open. When a wealthy investor refuses to shake hands with a black man during a crucial meeting, he thinks it's just routine, another day preserving old biases. What he doesn't realize is that the man he dismissed is actually the CEO who built the company from scratch, carrying the strength of generations on his shoulders. That simple act of disrespect ignites a chain reaction that will reveal deep prejudice, challenge corporate power, and prove that once justice is awakened, it cannot be ignored. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story will be one you definitely won't want to miss. As the morning sun stretched long shadows across Omnivis's shining glass headquarters in downtown Atlanta, Elijah Brooks stepped through the employee entrance. His polished shoes tapped softly on the marble floor, his charcoal suit tailored perfectly, understated but unmistakably quality. "Morning, Mr. James," Elijah greeted the elderly janitor, carefully polishing the brass handrails. "How's your grandson doing in college?" Mr. James's face lit up. "Made the dean's list again, Mr. Brooks. That scholarship program you set up changed his life." Elijah smiled warmly. His hard work earned it, not me. At the front desk, Maria, the receptionist, greeted him with a bright smile. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks. Your daughter's already upstairs prepping in the war room for the big meeting." Elijah nodded. "Thanks, Maria. How's your mom after her surgery?" "Much better. Those flowers you sent really lifted her spirits." Elijah knew true leadership meant remembering these small, human moments that make people feel truly seen. The executive elevator whispered him up to the 50th floor. Instead of heading to his corner office with its breathtaking Atlanta skyline view, Elijah went straight to the executive briefing room. His leadership team was already gathered for their Monday meeting. 12 faces turned toward him, but only Camilla stood. His daughter's sharp blazer and confident stance embodied everything he hoped she'd become: fierce, brilliant, and unafraid. At just 26, she commanded the room like a seasoned CEO. "The Whitmore team arrived early," she reported, handing him a sleek tablet. "They're settling into the client lounge on 49. Elijah scanned the agenda, noting her meticulous preparation. Today's investment, $100 million, would expand Omnivis into emerging markets. "Remember," Elijah addressed his team, "today we're testing more than just numbers. We're testing character." He locked eyes with each person. "I'll be in the meeting as just another team member. No one tells the Whitmore Group who I am." Marcus, his CFO, raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Whitmore isn't exactly known for being progressive." "Exactly why we're doing it this way," Camilla added with quiet intensity. "Let's see who he really is when he thinks no one important is watching." The team reviewed reports, but the real tension was in the air. Everyone understood that what was at stake was far beyond money. After the briefing, Camilla walked beside Elijah toward the boardroom. Their footsteps matched perfectly. A rhythm formed from years walking these halls together. "Security confirmed Whitmore is here," she said softly. "Did you check his background?" "Third-generation wealth," Elijah replied. "Family made their fortune in Connecticut shipping. All 28 companies in his portfolio have white CEOs." "Not a coincidence," Camilla said, jaw tightening. "Dad, are you sure about this approach? We could just—" "You have to let people show you who they really are before you show them who you are," Elijah interrupted gently. They reached the glass boardroom doors. Inside, Charles Whitmore III stood at the head of the table, his silver hair glowing in the morning light. His Italian suit likely cost more than most cars. "Ready?" Camilla asked, adjusting his tie. Elijah smiled, thinking of his mother who had pressed his shirts for years while cleaning houses. "Always ready, baby girl." They entered. Camilla strode confidently to present, while Elijah took a seat at the far end. notebook in hand, appearing as any regular team member. Whitmore barely glanced his way, focused on Camilla and the other executives. Elijah's calm exterior hid decades of experience reading rooms like this. The sun climbed higher, flooding the space where power, prejudice, and justice were about to collide in ways no one expected. The boardroom doors swung open with practiced precision as Whitmore entered. His presence filled the room like an overpowering scent, impossible to ignore. His assistant hurried in just behind him, clutching a leather portfolio. Charles's steel gray suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. His monogrammed cufflinks caught the morning light as he extended his hand toward Camilla, his smile carefully practiced and calculating. "Ms. Brooks," he purred, holding her hand just a moment too long. "Stunning presentation setup you have here. Very modern." The word modern hung in the air, heavy with unspoken judgment, as if the concept itself was something he reluctantly tolerated. Charles moved around the table, shaking hands with each executive. "Tom, good to see you again. That golf game at the country club still on for Sunday?" He nodded toward another. "Mike, how's that boat? Still docked in Newport?" Each greeting was a precise reminder of his social standing. When he reached Marcus, the CFO, the handshake noticeably shortened. Then he passed Elijah's seat, and his eyes skipped right over it, pretending it was empty. Elijah stood quietly and extended his hand with the same quiet dignity his mother had taught him through years of navigating spaces where he wasn't always welcome. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." Charles's gaze flicked to Elijah's face, then quickly away. A slight curl of his lip dismissed Elijah as he turned back to Camilla, speaking over Elijah's outstretched hand like swatting away a bothersome fly. "Shall we begin? I have several other meetings today." The room seemed to chill instantly. Marcus gripped his pen so tightly it nearly snapped. Camilla's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened, sharp as polished granite. Elijah slowly lowered his hand and sat back down, his calm mask hiding the familiar sting of this all-too-familiar dance. He had watched his mother endure it countless times. "Patience," she'd always said, "can be the sharpest weapon." "Of course," Camilla replied smoothly, clicking to her first slide. Omnivis's market penetration last quarter exceeded projections by 37%. Charles settled into his chair like a king on his throne, casually signaling his assistant to pour water. "Impressive numbers, if sustainable," he remarked, "though I do wonder about demographic challenges in your target markets." "Demographic challenges?" Camilla's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Let's be direct," Charles said, waving his hand dismissively. "Your consumer base is heavily urban, inner city. There are certain risks." He paused to sip water. "My fund prefers companies with more traditional market stability." The coded message hung in the air like smoke. Elijah made a deliberate note in his notebook, pen slow and steady. Charles continued his presentation, each slide packed with veiled critiques disguised as business advice. "Culture fit is essential for our portfolio companies," he declared. "We maintain certain standards, a certain professional appearance." His eyes scanned the room and lingered disapprovingly on Elijah's modest suit. "Our $100 million investment would come with expectations, corporate governance, and who sits in which chairs." Camilla's knuckles whitened around her tablet, but her voice stayed steady. "Our governance structure is clearly outlined in the prospectus." "Yes, yes," Charles waved off her words. "But these things can be adjusted. Speaking of which, I'm surprised your CEO isn't here. This is a significant discussion to delegate." He glanced at Camilla with barely hidden condescension. "Junior executives." Elijah made another quiet note, the soft scratch of his pen drawing Charles's irritated glare. "Could someone get that distracting scratching to stop?" Charles snapped. "This isn't a stenography session. Perhaps take notes elsewhere." Before anyone could respond, Charles slammed a thick portfolio onto the table with a definitive thump. Now then, I believe we've covered preliminaries. I look forward to speaking directly with the CEO, someone who can make real decisions. Perfect timing, Camilla said, her smile radiant with quiet justice. She gestured toward the far end of the table. Mr. Whitmore, I believe you've been trying to ignore our CEO, my father, Elijah Brooks, for the past hour. Color drained from Charles's face. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The silence was deafening. Every eye shifted between Elijah and Charles as the moment of reckoning unfolded. Elijah rose again, with the same quiet dignity he'd shown all morning. He extended his hand across the table once more. Mr. Whitmore, shall we try this introduction again? Charles's hand twitched, but remained down. Clearing his throat, he straightened his tie. I wasn't aware. Your position wasn't made clear to me beforehand. That would have changed my behavior. Elijah's voice was soft but carried through the room. Charles's face flushed red. He shuffled papers nervously, searching for something to do with his hands. Anything but shake Elijah's still extended hand. Well, naturally, protocol dictates. I mean, had I known your role... My role, Elijah interrupted, lowering his hand at last, has been exactly what it's been for the last hour. I'm the founder and CEO of Omnivus Technologies. Now, shall we address your concerns about our demographic challenges? Charles's assistant seemed to shrink into his chair, frantically taking notes while avoiding eye contact with anyone. Around the table, the other executives sat a little straighter, some barely hiding satisfied smirks. Perhaps we should review your technical assessment of our AI infrastructure, Elijah said calmly, clicking to a complex diagram on the screen. You mentioned concerns about scalability. Could you specify which components you believe are at risk? Charles tugged at his collar, clearly uncomfortable. Well, obviously the cloud architecture, that is, the neural networks. Elijah's tone sharpened beneath its calm surface. Which neural networks exactly? Our proprietary K-12 learning models or the healthcare diagnostic systems? Both, Charles stumbled. The whole system needs proper oversight. Interesting, Elijah replied, pulling up another slide. Our K-12 models aren't cloud-based, Mr. Whitmore. They run on edge computing devices in schools. It's in the basic product documentation. Camilla leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Perhaps that section was overlooked during your due diligence. Charles's face flushed deeper. My team handles technical reviews. I focus on the bigger picture. The bigger picture, Elijah echoed, like our demographic challenges. What followed was a methodical dismantling of every assumption Charles had made. With each question, Elijah exposed the shallow understanding Charles had of both the technology and the markets he claimed to be concerned about. When the meeting finally ended, Charles stood quickly, straightening his jacket. Miss Brooks, he said pointedly to Camilla, ignoring Elijah, might I have a word in private about future meetings? Camilla arched an eyebrow. Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of our CEO. It's a delicate matter of protocol, Charles insisted. Certain conversations are better handled at appropriate levels. And what level would that be, Mr. Whitmore? Elijah's voice cut through the tension. Before Charles could answer, Camilla stood. My office, both of you, now. Their footsteps echoed silently on the polished floors as they walked. Charles's assistant tried to follow, but one look from Camilla stopped him cold. Inside her office, with its wall of windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Camilla faced Charles. You wanted to talk about protocol? Charles smoothed his tie, a nervous habit growing more obvious. I meant that future negotiations might proceed more smoothly with a different arrangement of participants. Different participants? Camilla's voice could freeze hell. I think we all know what Mr. Whitmore is suggesting, Elijah said calmly, but I have a different proposal. He turned to his daughter. Don't reject his offer just yet. What? Camilla's shock was clear. Let's give Mr. Whitmore a chance to prove his commitment to understanding our company. A week-long immersion tour. Every department, every level, full exposure to our culture and our people. Dad, you can't be serious. Let him dig his own hole, Elijah said with a calm smile that never faltered. Sometimes people need a longer rope to show everyone exactly who they are. Charles stood trapped between them, his carefully built world of privilege beginning to crack. He opened his mouth to object, but no words came. Later, the warm glow of Edison's soul food kitchen wrapped around Elijah like a familiar embrace. He'd chosen this place deliberately, one of Atlanta's oldest black-owned restaurants, where generations of civil rights leaders had broken bread and planned movements. The private dining room's walls were lined with black and white photographs documenting that rich history. Dad, I still think you're being too generous, Camilla said, stirring her sweet tea. Around the large round table, Omnivis's executive team nodded in agreement. The aroma of freshly baked cornbread and slow-cooked collard greens filled the air. Elijah wiped his mouth with a napkin thoughtfully. Sometimes, the most powerful move isn't an immediate strike. It's giving someone enough space to reveal their true nature. Marcus Thompson, their chief technology officer, leaned forward. But after what he did today, the disrespect was clear. That's exactly why this matters, Elijah replied, nodding toward a photograph of Dr. King on the wall, taken at this very restaurant. Change doesn't always come from confrontation alone. Sometimes it comes from forcing people to see themselves clearly. As the waitress brought out plates of crispy fried chicken, mac and cheese, and sweet potato pie, Elijah thanked her by name. He'd known Miss Ruby for 20 years. "Here's what I'm thinking," Elijah said, his voice calm but intense, demanding attention. "We'll start Charles in our Youth Coding Academy in Vine City. Let him see the brilliant minds his prejudice would overlook." Camilla's fork paused midair. "The same kids he probably assumes can't even use a computer." "Exactly," Elijah nodded. "Then we'll move him through our innovation labs, where our diverse engineering teams are developing AI that serves all communities, not just the privileged few." "And the community outreach programs?" asked Sarah Chen, their head of social impact. Elijah confirmed, Day 3. He'll see firsthand how we're teaching entrepreneurship in neighborhoods he probably avoids driving through, how we're turning what some see as demographic challenges into clear demographic advantages. The executive team exchanged knowing glances. They'd all witnessed Charles's thinly veiled bias during the meeting. But what was the real goal here? Camilla tapped her fork lightly against her plate. "We don't actually want his money, do we?" Elijah's eyes crinkled at the corners with a quiet smile. "What we want is for every Charles Whitmore in every boardroom to understand this. The future they fear is already here, and it's brighter than they could have imagined." Camilla's smile slowly spread as realization set in. "You're going to make him confront every assumption he's ever made." "Every single one," Elijah confirmed, "and he'll have to do it publicly. His reputation depends on it now." For the next hour, the team mapped out the plan in detail. Charles would meet their youngest coding prodigies, their most innovative engineers, and their most successful community graduates. No escape routes, no safe excuses. "What if he refuses?" Marcus asked, finishing his sweet potato pie. "He won't," Camilla said confidently. "His ego won't let him. He has to prove he's not what everyone saw today." Elijah nodded, dabbing his mouth one last time. Pride's a powerful motivator. So is the fear of public shame. Later that evening, after everyone else had left, Camilla stayed behind with her father. The restaurant was quiet now, just the soft sounds of cleanup in the kitchen. "You learned this from Grandma, didn't you?" she asked softly. "This way of handling people like Charles?" Elijah's eyes grew distant. "Your grandmother cleaned houses for men like Charles. She knew their wives, their children, their secrets. She taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is watch and wait, let people reveal themselves. But she never had the power you have now." "No," Camilla agreed, "which is exactly why we have to use it wisely." The next morning, Charles Whitmore III sat at his mahogany desk in his Connecticut office. Staring at a formal invitation, just delivered by courier. The thick cream-colored paper bore Omnivis's embossed logo. You are cordially invited to participate in the Omnivis Founders Experience Week. Join CEO Elijah Brooks for an exclusive inside look at our company's culture, innovation, and community impact. Your unique perspective as a potential strategic partner would be invaluable. Charles's hand trembled slightly as he read. His assistant hovered nervously nearby. After a long pause, Charles picked up his Mont Blanc pen and checked the box marked, "Accept with pleasure." He couldn't say no, not after yesterday's disaster. This was his chance to repair the damage, to prove he was open-minded and progressive. "Send this back immediately," he instructed his assistant, "and clear my calendar for next week." Unbeknownst to Charles, Elijah was already finalizing the itinerary. Each day meticulously crafted to dismantle another layer of prejudice. The trap was set, baited with Charles's own pride and desperation to save face. The converted warehouse stood proudly in downtown Atlanta, its red brick walls freshly restored and windows gleaming in the morning sun. The Omnivis Community Innovation Center's sign declared its mission. Building tomorrow's tech leaders today. Charles tugged nervously at his designer tie, feeling increasingly out of place. His Italian leather shoes clicked sharply against the polished concrete floor as he entered. Thomas, his assistant, trailing behind with tablet and portfolio. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," greeted a young black woman in a crisp blazer at the reception desk. "I'm Dr. Kesha Washington, Director of Engineering Education." Charles blinked, caught off guard by her title. "Doctor of Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence, MIT," she added smoothly. "Shall we begin the tour?" Their first stop was an open workspace, where dozens of engineers huddled around large screens, discussing code and system architecture. The steady hum of focused conversation filled the air. "This is our primary development hub," Dr. Washington explained. "We're working on an AI-driven healthcare platform addressing historical bias in medical data sets." A young man with dreadlocks and wire-rimmed glasses approached. "Mr. Whitmore, welcome. I'm Marcus Chen, lead AI architect. Would you like to see our latest neural network implementation?" Charles nodded stiffly, eyes flicking between Marcus's casual tech attire and the complex diagrams on his screen. "It's impressive that you've mastered such advanced technology," Charles said. Marcus's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened slightly. "I graduated top of my class at Stanford, then earned my PhD at Carnegie Mellon. Mastering technology is what we do here." They moved through department after department, each revealing excellence that unsettled Charles more and more. In the UX design studio, Black and Latina women presented their award-winning interfaces. In the blockchain division, a young man in a kufi cap explained their groundbreaking work in decentralized finance. "Remarkable," Charles muttered repeatedly, his tone growing increasingly strained. "So inspiring to see these kinds of opportunities being created," Charles muttered, his assistant Thomas wincing at each backhanded compliment. Around them, the professionals exchanged knowing looks, their patience thinning beneath polite smiles. In the artificial intelligence lab, they met Dr. James Baldwin, no relation, he joked, who led a team developing facial recognition software that worked accurately across all skin tones. "You see, traditional AI has significant bias," Dr. Baldwin explained. Yes, Charles interrupted with a dismissive tone. "Very commendable, helping your community overcome these challenges." "Actually," Dr. Baldwin replied firmly, "we're helping every tech company overcome failures to account for human diversity. Our patents are already licensed by 3 Fortune 500 firms." The tour moved on to a startup incubator, where young entrepreneurs pitched their ideas. Charles's comments grew more patronizing. "It warms my heart to see them trying their hand at business," he murmured loud enough for Thomas to hear, "though they might benefit from more traditional business training." "Each entrepreneur held at least one advanced degree, Doctor," Washington interjected coolly, Many had already founded successful companies. Near the end of the tour, they entered a classroom where high school students learned advanced programming. A 16-year-old girl demonstrated an app she created to help elderly neighbors coordinate medical appointments. "How sweet," Charles said, patting her shoulder condescendingly. "Keep reaching for those stars." "Thank you," the girl replied with a sharp smile. "My app just won the national STEM competition last month. Google and Apple are interested in acquiring it." As they neared the exit, Charles loosened his tie. The morning had clearly challenged his worldview. The facility's achievements were undeniable, yet he framed them as exceptions rather than examples of excellence. "Well," he said to Thomas, straightening his jacket, "it's well run for what it is." Behind a nearby pillar, Camilla Brooks stood silently, recording every word on her phone. She'd been shadowing the tour, documenting Charles's reactions. Her father had been right. Give him enough rope, and he'll hang himself with his own words. Thomas glanced back nervously, spotting Camilla but choosing not to warn his boss. Through the windows, Elijah Brooks's car pulled up for the next phase of the tour. Charles tugged at his collar again, unaware that every dismissive comment, patronizing smile, and backhanded compliment had been noted and would become part of a lesson he wasn't prepared to learn. Later, at Marcel's, the premier French restaurant in Atlanta, the private dining room glowed with warm lighting and polished mahogany. Charles Whitmore III settled into his leather chair at the head of the table, already on his second glass of Bordeaux. Around him sat Omnivis's diversity and inclusion leadership team, accomplished professionals whose presence seemed to make him increasingly uneasy. Dr. Jeremiah Richardson, head of Global Inclusion Strategy, sat to his right, her Harvard MBA pin gleaming as she delicately cut into her steak. "Mr. Whitmore, what are your thoughts on our talent pipeline programs after today's tour?" Charles swirled his wine, cheeks flushed. "Well, it's certainly colorful." He chuckled at his own joke, but the room remained silent. "What I mean is, while these initiatives are admirable, we must consider the broader business culture." "Please elaborate," said Marcus Chen, who joined from the morning tour, his expression neutral, but fingers tapping steadily on his water glass. "In my 40 years of experience," Charles leaned back, loosening his tie, "I've found that certain, shall we say, traditional corporate values ensure the smoothest operations. It's about cultural fit. You understand?" Dr. Richardson's fork clicked sharply against her plate. "Traditional values? Could you be more specific?" "Oh, you know." Charles waved a hand dismissively. "Proper business etiquette, established hierarchies, respect for conventional leadership styles." He took a long sip of wine. These modern approaches, while well-intentioned, can sometimes disrupt the natural order. Across the table, Camilla Brooks discreetly typed on her phone. "He's hanging himself? Every word is pure gold." She sent the text to her father, then looked up with a practiced smile. "Natural order," she prompted innocently. "Please tell us more about that, Mr. Whitmore." The wine had loosened Charles's tongue. "Take dress codes, for instance. I noticed quite a few unusual choices today. Dreadlocks, ethnic garments. It's not what clients expect in a serious business environment." Several team members exchanged glances. Dr. Richardson cleared her throat. "Our dress code celebrates authenticity while maintaining professionalism. It's actually increased productivity and client satisfaction." Yes, Charles chuckled patronizingly. "But what about the optics? Major investors might be less understanding." "Less understanding of what exactly?" Marcus asked quietly. Charles missed the warning edge in Marcus's tone. "Well, when I started in venture capital, we had certain standards. Not everyone is ready for such a diverse approach. Some of my colleagues might need convincing that this isn't just some social experiment." Camilla's phone buzzed with her father's message. "Let him talk. Every word is a nail in his own coffin." As dinner progressed, Charles grew more candid with each glass of wine. He cracked off color jokes about urban culture, repeatedly referred to the women present as girls, and suggested some departments needed a firmer hand to maintain proper standards. Later, back in his suite at the St. Regis, Charles loosened his bow tie and settled at his desk, leather-bound notebook open. His assistant Thomas quietly arranged documents nearby, his face carefully neutral. "Take this down," Charles slurred slightly. "Engineering department. Too casual, needs structure. Suggest proper dress code enforcement." He paused to sip his scotch. "AI division. Concerning lack of traditional hierarchy. Recommend management restructuring." Thomas typed steadily, jaw tightening with each note. "And that community program," Charles continued, "while admirable, requires significant oversight, perhaps more experienced leadership." Finally, Thomas spoke up. "Sir, if I may, I believe you might be misreading the situation." Charles looked up sharply. "Oh, these teams are highly effective. Their metrics exceed industry standards, and Dr. Washington's leadership is studied at business schools as a model of innovation management." "Come now," Thomas scoffed. "You're letting optics cloud your judgment. I've built billion-dollar companies. I know what works." "Sir," Thomas pressed carefully, "Omnivis's culture is precisely why they outperform competitors. Their unconventional approach is their strength." Charles waved him off. "Just note my recommendations. We'll need significant changes once the investment goes through." He turned back to his notebook, missing Thomas's concerned expression. "More notes?" Charles muttered, writing unsteadily. "Diversity team. Excessive influence on operations. Suggest relegating to HR only." He frowned at his own handwriting. "And Dr. Richardson. Too aggressive for a girl. Needs to learn her place." Thomas stood abruptly, gathering his tablets. "Sir, I must insist." "That will be all, Thomas," Charles cut him off sharply. "We can finish tomorrow. Good night." Thomas hesitated at the door, watching his boss scribble more notes with an unsteady hand. Concern was clear on his face, knowing these recommendations would only dig Charles deeper into trouble. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curved glass walls of Omnivis's Innovation Center. Elijah Brooks stood in the lobby, hands clasped behind his back, watching Charles Whitmore, the third, emerge from his chauffeured car. Charles's steps were slower than usual, likely nursing a hangover from the previous night's wine-fueled dinner. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," Elijah greeted pleasantly. "I trust you slept well?" Charles adjusted his tie, squinting against the bright atrium light. "Quite well, thank you, though I expected your head of operations to lead today's tour." "I prefer to handle certain aspects personally," Elijah replied, gesturing toward the security gates, "especially when it comes to our crown jewel." Passing through the sleek security checkpoint, Charles noted every guard was impeccably dressed in suits matching his own caliber, a detail that seemed to unsettle him. The innovation lab stretched across 3 floors connected by floating glass staircases. Holographic displays flickered between workstations, showing complex data models and architectural renderings. The space hummed with quiet intensity as engineers and designers moved purposefully between projects. "This is where we develop our next-generation AI systems," Elijah explained, leading Charles past a row of quantum computing stations. "Every piece of technology you see here was developed in-house." Charles nodded, trying to maintain his usual air of authority despite being clearly overwhelmed. "Impressive hardware, certainly, though I wonder about the expertise level of your team." "You can ask them yourself," Elijah said, approaching a curved desk surrounded by floating holographic displays. "Mr. Whitmore, meet Dr. Adana Okoro, our lead systems architect." Dr. Okoro turned, revealing a striking woman in her late 20s, wearing a perfectly tailored blazer over a traditional Nigerian head wrap. She stood with natural grace, extending her hand. "Welcome to my playground, Mr. Whitmore." Charles hesitated before shaking her hand, his smile stiff. "Quite young for such a position, aren't you?" "Age is less relevant than achievement. Wouldn't you agree?" she replied smoothly. With a gesture, she expanded a holographic display. "I'd be happy to walk you through our latest quantum neural network architecture, unless the mathematics would be too challenging." The subtle challenge in her voice made Charles flush slightly. Please proceed, though perhaps in layman's terms. Of course. Dr. Okoro's fingers danced through the air, manipulating complex equations with practiced ease. We've developed a new approach to quantum entanglement, allowing unprecedented processing power. Would you like me to explain how we solved the decoherence problem that stumped IBM for the past decade? Charles blinked rapidly, clearly out of his depth. I'm more interested in practical applications. What's the market potential? Currently, we're implementing this system in major hospitals to predict pandemic patterns, she said, pulling up another display. We've already saved an estimated 50,000 lives in underserved communities, Dr. Okoro explained. But if you're focused solely on market value, we're projecting $3 billion in licensing fees next quarter alone. Elijah watched quietly as Charles tried to regain control of the conversation. And who oversees your work? Surely there's a senior architect who signs off on these projects? Charles asked. Dr. Okoro's smile remained calm and professional. I report directly to Mr. Brooks. Would you like to see my patents? I hold 23 at last count, including the core architecture powering most modern smartphones. Charles tugged at his collar and looked to Elijah for support, but found none. Trying another approach, Charles asked, Fascinating. Where did you study? I completed my first PhD at MIT at 19, she replied smoothly. My second is from Stanford, where I now serve as a visiting professor. But my most valuable education came from my grandmother's village in Nigeria, where I learned innovation isn't bound by Western expectations. The tour continued, with Dr. Okoro calmly dismantling every attempt Charles made to question her expertise. Her knowledge wasn't just comprehensive, it was revolutionary. Later that evening, in his private office overlooking Atlanta's skyline, Elijah sat alone at his desk. The city lights twinkled below, but his attention was fixed on an old, worn photograph in his hands. It showed a young black woman in a maid's uniform standing outside a magnificent Connecticut mansion. She held the same quiet dignity Elijah carried now, even while gripping a mop in weathered hands. He traced a finger gently across his mother's face in the photo. Behind her loomed the Whitmore family mansion, a symbol of wealth she helped maintain but could never access. Another photo showed her serving at one of the Whitmore's famous garden parties, invisible to the wealthy white guests she waited on. Elijah placed the photos carefully on his desk, remembering how his mother came home exhausted, but still helped him with his homework. How she saved every extra penny to buy him his first computer, and how she whispered every night, "They may own the house, but they don't own your mind." The confrontation with Charles was no longer just business. Every dismissive glance, every condescending remark echoed decades of ignored dignity and overlooked potential. Elijah straightened the photographs with deliberate care, his mother's quiet strength flowing through his veins. As the sun set over Atlanta's Buckhead district, Charles's car pulled up to Elijah Brooks's residence. The house, while impressive, was not the ostentatious mansion Charles expected. Instead, it was a tastefully renovated historic home with clean lines and warm light spilling from its windows. Elijah greeted Charles at the door, dressed casually in a charcoal sweater and slacks. "Welcome to my home, Mr. Whitmore." Charles nodded stiffly, offering a bottle of wine. "Thank you for the invitation, though I must say this is rather unconventional. Sometimes the best business conversations happen outside the boardroom," Elijah replied, leading Charles inside. The walls were lined with photographs in simple black frames, forming an intimate gallery of memories. The dining room was set for two with fine china and crystal glasses, refined taste without flashiness. A private chef served their first course, a delicate butternut squash soup that even Charles had to admit was excellent. "Your home is different than I imagined," Charles remarked, eyes drifting to the photos on the walls. "What did you imagine?" Elijah asked, voice calm and steady. Charles shifted in his seat. "Well, given your success, I expected something more extravagant." Elijah finished for him. "I prefer to invest in things that matter, community programs, education initiatives, preserving history." As they moved to the main course, perfectly seared sea bass, Charles's attention kept returning to one photograph. It showed a young black woman in a simple dress standing proudly next to a boy in a graduation cap and gown. "Your mother?" Charles asked, gesturing with his wine glass. "Yes," Elijah said softly. "That was my elementary school graduation. She worked 3 jobs to send me to private school." Charles nodded absently, taking a sip of wine. "What kind of work did she do?" "Mainly domestic work," Elijah replied, watching Charles carefully. "She cleaned houses in Connecticut for wealthy families and became head housekeeper for some of the most prominent names in Greenwich." Charles's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. "Connecticut, you say?" "Yes," Elijah continued evenly. "One of her longest jobs was with a family named Whitmore, a beautiful mansion on Maple Hill Road. She worked there throughout the 1970s. The fork in Charles's hand froze midair, a piece of sea bass suspended in time. His face drained of color as memory stirred. "The house had a grand staircase," Elijah went on, "with a curved banister that took hours to polish. Mother would come home with aching hands but never complained. She took special pride in keeping the crystal chandelier spotless." Charles set down his fork with a slight tremor. I don't recall." "You wouldn't," Elijah said quietly. "The help was meant to be invisible." "But she remembered you, Charles. She remembered how you never looked her in the eye, even after serving your breakfast every morning for 15 years. The private chef silently cleared their plates and replaced them with desserts neither man would touch. The ticking of a grandfather clock echoed through the room. She saved every extra dollar she earned in that house," Elijah continued, his voice calm but heavy with decades of memory. "She put it all toward my education. She said she wanted me to sit at tables like the ones she cleaned." Charles reached for his water glass, throat suddenly dry. "That was a different time." "Was it?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. 4 days ago, you wouldn't even shake my hand in my own boardroom." The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Charles barely touched his dessert, his mind elsewhere. When he finally left, Elijah watched from his doorway as the car disappeared into the night. Later, in his hotel suite, Charles lay awake staring at the ceiling. Fragments of memory floated through his mind. A quiet woman in a gray uniform moving silently through their house. How she appeared and disappeared like a ghost, keeping their world pristine but unseen. He vaguely remembered her face now, the same quiet dignity he recognized in Elijah, the same careful way of navigating spaces dominated by others. She had served countless dinner parties, holiday celebrations, and business meetings, always maintaining that invisible barrier between served and server. Charles shifted uncomfortably, recalling how she sometimes brought her young son to work when school was closed, a serious boy who sat quietly in the kitchen reading books. Had that been Elijah? The thought made his stomach turn. The city lights cast shifting shadows across his hotel room as Charles confronted memories he'd never faced before. What was her name? He couldn't even remember that much. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Camilla's corner office at Omnibus. She was reviewing gala preparations when her phone buzzed with an unexpected email from HelenWhitmore.com. Subject: regarding Charles Whitmore. Important information. Camilla sat straighter, fingers hovering over the screen. She'd heard of Helen Whitmore, the daughter Charles never mentioned, who disappeared from Greenwich's social circles years ago. The email was direct. "Ms. Brooks, I've been following the situation with my father at Omnibus. There's information you should have about his investment practices. I left the family business years ago because of his discriminatory policies, but I kept documentation. Would you be willing to meet?" Camilla's heart raced as she dialed Helen's number. The voice that answered was soft but determined. "Thank you for calling," Helen said. "I've been watching this unfold from afar. My father hasn't changed." "We'd love to hear your perspective," Camilla replied, trying to contain her excitement. "I have emails, hundreds of them, internal memos about cultural fit requirements for investments, lists of companies rejected solely because of the founder's race. He's been systematically blocking minority-owned businesses from capital for decades." Camilla's fingers flew across the keyboard taking notes. "Would you be willing to share these documents?" I already have them prepared, Helen said. I've been waiting for the right moment. When I saw him refuse to shake Mr. Brooks's hand, it brought back every painful memory. Helen's voice cracked slightly. I left home at 23. My mother was black, one of his college girlfriends. He kept us a secret until he couldn't anymore. When I started questioning his business practices, pointing out the racism, he told me I was too emotional about these things. Camilla leaned back in her chair, absorbing the weight of Helen's words. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, but walking away was the best decision I ever made. I've built my own life working in diversity advocacy, but these documents, they could expose everything. Would you be willing to meet in person? Camilla asked. I'm actually in Atlanta now, Helen replied. I flew in last night. I knew the gala was coming up and, well, timing is everything. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near Omnibus headquarters. An hour later, Camilla sat across from a woman whose features echoed Charles Whitmore's, but whose presence was entirely her own. Helen was elegant and composed, with warm brown skin and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Helen slid a USB drive across the table. Everything's here. Email threads, meeting minutes, internal memos spanning 15 years. He was careful with his language, but the pattern is clear. Camilla picked up the drive, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but historical. This could change everything. That's what I'm hoping for, Helen said. But there's something else you should know. She pulled out her phone and showed Camilla a series of recent texts from Charles's assistant. Thomas has been keeping me informed. My father's planning something for his speech tonight. Camilla hurried back to Omnibus, finding her father in his office. Elijah was reviewing his own speech for the gala when she burst in. Dad, we have it. Actual proof of Charles's discrimination. His own daughter brought it to us. Camilla's words tumbled out as she explained everything Helen had shared. Elijah listened carefully, expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. We need to wait, he finally said. Wait? Dad, this is exactly what we need to do. Let him speak tonight. Elijah interrupted gently. Let him stand in front of everyone and show exactly who he is. The evidence will mean more after he's exposed himself publicly. Camilla paced the office. But we could stop him now before he... Sometimes, Elijah said, the most powerful move is to give someone enough rope to hang themselves. Charles has spent a lifetime hiding behind carefully worded memos and private conversations. Tonight, he'll be on stage unfiltered in front of hundreds of people. The rest of the day passed in a blur of gala preparations. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons was transformed with elegant decorations in Omnibus's colors. Tech leaders, investors, and media filled the space, buzzing with anticipation. Charles arrived early, dressed in an expensive tuxedo, looking confident despite the week's tensions. He worked the room with practiced charm, shaking hands and laughing with wealthy investors. If he noticed Helen sitting quietly at a corner table, he gave no sign. Camilla watched from across the room, the USB drive heavy in her clutch bag. Her father stood at her elbow, calm as always. The keynote speech is in 10 minutes, she whispered. Elijah nodded. Sometimes justice requires patience. Let's see what Charles says when he thinks he's among friends. The Four Seasons ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and flashing smartphone cameras. Nearly 400 of Atlanta's most influential business leaders filled the space, their evening wear reflecting soft golden light. Tech journalists lined the back wall, notebooks and recorders ready. Charles Whitmore III adjusted his bow tie as he waited for his introduction. Despite the week's challenges, he felt in his element, surrounded by wealth and power. He'd given countless speeches like this before. The MC, a local news anchor, stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker for the evening, Mr. Charles Whitmore III, managing partner of Greenwich Capital Partners. Polite applause rippled through the room as Charles took the stage. He gripped the podium's sides, surveying the crowd with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Thank you all for that warm welcome, he began, voice polished and refined. This past week at Omnibus has been enlightening. A few knowing chuckles from the audience. Charles smiled, warming to his theme. I've seen firsthand how this company embraces what some might call progressive values in the tech space. He paused, letting the words hang. It's quite remarkable what they've achieved with their unique approach to talent acquisition. In the front row, Camilla's knuckles whitened around her champagne glass. Beside her, Elijah sat perfectly still, face unreadable. When I first arrived, Charles continued, I admit I had doubts about their unconventional methods, but seeing their community programs, truly inspiring work, helping underprivileged people access technology careers, that's exactly the kind of social responsibility that plays well in today's market. He took a sip of water, missing the growing tension in the room. Of course, as investors, we must balance these admirable social initiatives with hard business realities. My 40 years in venture capital have taught me that success requires maintaining certain standards. Cultural alignment, if you will. Uncomfortable shifts rippled through the audience. Journalists scribbled notes faster. What Omnivus has done, integrating diversity initiatives while maintaining profitability, is quite remarkable. Almost surprising, really. Charles chuckled. Though I suppose that's what makes them such an interesting investment opportunity. He launched into self-congratulatory anecdotes about past investments, repeatedly calling Omnivus's approach experimental and bold. Each comment felt heavier in the increasingly uneasy room. In conclusion, Charles said, I look forward to bringing Greenwich Capital's traditional excellence to this exciting venture. With proper guidance, I believe we can help Omnivus achieve even greater heights while preserving their unique character. The applause was scattered and brief. Charles returned to his seat, apparently satisfied. The MC quickly stepped up. And now, please welcome Omnivus's founder and CEO, Mr. Elijah Brooks. Elijah rose slowly, straightening his jacket. The room fell completely silent as he took the stage. He didn't touch the podium, instead standing slightly to its side, his presence naturally filling the space. Thank you, he began, voice quiet but clear. Mr. Whitmore's speech was indeed enlightening. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. 40 years ago, my mother worked as a housekeeper in Greenwich, Connecticut. Elijah's words carried clearly across the silent room. She cleaned the homes of wealthy families, including one particular house on Maple Drive, the Whitmore house. Charles's face drained of color. Every day she arrived at 6 a.m. through the service entrance. The help was meant to be invisible, but she remembered you, Charles. She remembered how you never looked her in the eye, even after serving your breakfast every morning for 15 years. The private chef silently cleared their plates, replacing them with desserts neither man touched. The ticking of a grandfather clock echoed through the room. She saved every extra dollar she earned in that house, Elijah said, his voice steady, but weighted with decades of quiet strength. She put it all toward my education. She wanted me to sit at tables like the ones she cleaned. Charles reached for his water glass, throat suddenly dry. That was a different time. Was it? Elijah asked, raising an eyebrow. 4 days ago, you wouldn't even shake my hand in my own boardroom. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Charles barely touched his dessert, his mind elsewhere. When he finally left, Elijah watched from his doorway as the car disappeared into the night. The next morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Camilla's office at Omnivus. She was reviewing gala preparations when her phone buzzed, an email from HelenWhitmore.com. Subject: regarding Charles Whitmore. Important information. Camilla's fingers hovered over the screen. She had heard of Helen Whitmore, the daughter Charles never mentioned, who vanished from Greenwich's social scene years ago. The email was direct. Ms. Brooks, I've been following the situation with my father at Omnivus. There's information you should have about his investment practices. I left the family business years ago because of his discriminatory policies, but I kept documentation. Would you be willing to meet? Camilla's heart raced as she dialed the number. The voice that answered was soft but resolute. Thank you for calling, Helen said. I've been watching this unfold from afar. My father hasn't changed. We'd love to hear your perspective, Camilla replied, holding back excitement. I have emails, hundreds of them, internal memos about cultural fit requirements for investments, lists of companies rejected solely because their founders are black. He's systematically blocked minority-owned businesses from funding for decades. Camilla's fingers flew across the keyboard taking notes. Would you be willing to share these documents? I already have them ready, Helen said. I've been waiting for the right moment. When I saw him refuse to shake Mr. Brooks's hand, it brought back every painful memory. Helen's voice cracked slightly. I left home at 23. My mother was black, one of his college girlfriends. He kept us a secret until he couldn't anymore. When I started questioning his business practices, pointing out the racism, he told me I was too emotional. Camilla leaned back, absorbing the weight of Helen's words. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, but walking away was the best decision I ever made. I've built my own life working in diversity advocacy, but these documents, they could expose everything. Would you be willing to meet in person? I'm actually in Atlanta now, Helen replied. I flew in last night. I knew the gala was coming. Timing is everything. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near Omnibus headquarters. An hour later, Camilla sat across from a woman whose features echoed Charles Whitmore's, but whose presence was entirely her own. Helen was elegant and composed, with warm brown skin and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She slid a USB drive across the table. Everything's here. Email threads, meeting minutes, internal memos spanning 15 years. He was careful with his language, but the pattern is clear. Camilla picked up the drive, feeling its weight, not just physical, but historical. This could change everything. That's what I'm hoping for, Helen said. But there's something else you should know. She pulled out her phone, showing Camilla a series of recent texts from Charles's assistant. It's about exposure. The whole system needs to see itself in the mirror. Elijah was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it, but be careful. Make sure the documents can't be traced back to Helen. Camilla sat down at her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. She prepared encrypted emails to 3 trusted journalists, attaching key documents with personal information redacted. Within minutes, the messages were sent. Now we wait, she said, closing her laptop. They didn't have to wait long. By 10 a.m., their phones buzzed with notifications. The first story broke on TechCrunch. Exclusive. Leaked emails reveal systematic discrimination at top VC firm. An hour later, the Wall Street Journal followed. Greenwich Capital partner Charles Whitmore III implicated in bias scandal. The business world's reaction was swift and fierce. Whitmore's emails began trending on Twitter. CNBC ran breaking news segments. His gala speech from the night before played alongside screenshots of his damning messages. By noon, Greenwich Capital's PR team released a desperate statement promising to investigate the allegations and maintain ethical standards, but the damage was done. Elijah's phone rang, a board member from another venture capital firm seeking comment. He let it go to voicemail. Camilla's screen filled with messages from tech reporters demanding statements. Through the office's glass walls, Omnibus employees gathered around their computers, reading the news live. The energy in the building was electric, a sense that something long hidden was finally dragged into the light. Look at this, Camilla said, showing Elijah her phone. 3 of Greenwich Capital's largest limited partners announced they were reviewing their relationships with the firm. Charles's other board positions were already under scrutiny. Elijah watched the chaos unfold with quiet composure. Sometimes, he said softly, justice comes through patience, through letting people reveal themselves fully before they fall. His words were cut short by another breaking news alert. Charles Whitmore III cancels all public appearances and steps back from daily duties at Greenwich Capital. The paper trail he left was becoming his undoing, one headline at a time. Charles Whitmore III sat in his mahogany-paneled home office, watching his empire crumble through an endless stream of notifications. Morning sun cast long shadows across the Persian rug, but he hadn't moved from his leather chair since dawn. His phone buzzed again, another board member demanding answers. Charles, this is inexcusable. The Times is asking for comment. What do I tell them? He cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative. Richard, these emails are being taken out of context. If you let me explain, save it. We're calling an emergency meeting at noon. Your position at Tech Ventures is under review." The line went dead. Charles's hand shook as he set down the phone, only for it to ring again. This time, it was Margaret Chen from the Innovation Fund. "I trusted you, Charles. We all did. Do you know how this makes the entire industry look?" "Margaret, please." The board vote was unanimous. "We expect your resignation letter within the hour." Another call ended. Another piece of his carefully constructed world falling away. His assistant, Sarah Peterson, appeared at the door, face grim, holding up her tablet. "Mr. Whitmore, CNBC is running another segment. I've prepared my resignation letter." Charles looked up sharply. "Sarah, you've been with me for 8 years." "Yes," she said quietly. "Long enough to know these emails are real. I can't be part of this anymore." She placed an envelope on his desk and walked out, her heels clicking for the last time. His phone kept ringing, journalists, partners, old friends suddenly discovering their conscience. Each call brought worse news, more demands for accountability. The CEO of Master Tech Solutions announced they were terminating their partnership. A diversity advocate on CNN declared, "These emails reveal systemic racism hiding in plain sight in venture capital." A former mentee said, "I trusted you. You were my reference for 3 board positions. Now I must distance myself to survive." Charles desperately tried to regain control of the narrative, but found his corporate email suspended, standard protocol during investigations. His personal inbox overflowed with hundreds of unread messages, many with subject lines like "disgusted" and "shame on you." He clicked one from his country club. His membership was under review. Another from his alma mater's board of trustees. They were re-evaluating his position. The TV droned in the background. His own face replayed again and again from the Omnibus Gala. Each replay of his speech made him wince. The smug confidence, the thinly veiled condescension. How had he not seen it? A text message lit up his phone. "Dad, I hope you finally understand why I left. Helen." That message hurt the most. He hadn't spoken to his daughter in years, not since she confronted him about his subtle racism at a family dinner. The help was meant to be invisible. But she remembered you, Charles. She remembered how you never looked her in the eye, even after serving your breakfast every morning for 15 years. The private chef silently cleared their plates, replacing them with desserts neither man would touch. The ticking of a grandfather clock echoed through the room. "She saved every extra dollar she earned in that house," Elijah said, his voice steady but weighted with decades of quiet strength. "She put it all toward my education. She wanted me to sit at tables like the one she cleaned." Charles reached for his water glass, throat suddenly dry. That was a different time. "Was it?" Elijah asked, raising an eyebrow. 4 days ago, you wouldn't even shake my hand in my own boardroom." The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Charles barely touched his dessert, his mind elsewhere. When he finally left, Elijah watched from his doorway as the car disappeared into the night. The next morning, sunlight poured through Camilla's office windows. She was reviewing gala preparations when an email arrived from Helen Whitmore, Charles's estranged daughter. Subject: important information regarding Charles Whitmore. Camilla's heart raced as she read. Helen had kept years of documents exposing her father's discriminatory investment practices, emails, memos, and more. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near Omnibus headquarters. Helen slid a USB drive across the table, her eyes steady and determined. "Everything's here," she said. "This could change everything." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "Do it," he said, "but be careful. Make sure Helen can't be traced." Camilla sent encrypted emails with redacted documents to trusted journalists. Within hours, the story broke, exposing Charles Whitmore's systematic discrimination. The world reacted swiftly. Headlines, breaking news, viral social media. By midday, Greenwich Capital faced backlash. Board members resigning, investors pulling out, and Charles himself stepping down. Charles sat alone in his office, watching his empire crumble. Calls came fast, demands for answers, resignations, and severed ties. His carefully built facade was shattered. A text from his daughter Helen appeared. "Dad, I hope you finally understand why I left. One last time, Charles called Elijah. Was this all a setup? He demanded. No, Elijah replied calmly. You did this to yourself. They agreed to meet, but Elijah insisted, the community center where the tour began. The gymnasium felt colder, less familiar. Elijah stood at center court, hands in pockets, no tie, no pretense. Charles arrived, nervous and out of place. Thank you for meeting me, Charles said, voice wavering. Let's skip the pleasantries, Elijah replied. They faced the hard truths, a lifetime of exclusion, prejudice, and missed opportunities. Elijah said, You're not being punished for one moment. You're facing the consequences of a lifetime of choices. Later, Elijah took the stage at the gala. He held a photograph of his mother, Clara Brooks, a maid who worked tirelessly to give her son a better life. Behind every fortune, every mansion, every legacy are stories like hers. Elijah announced the Clara Brooks Equity Fund, with $500 million dedicated to supporting founders from historically excluded communities. Helen Whitmore stepped forward to chair the fund, declaring, My father spent his career building walls. Today I'm honored to help tear them down. Then Elijah proudly announced Camilla Brooks as the new CEO of Omnivus Technologies. Camilla spoke with passion and power. For too long, leadership in tech has looked one way, but that ends now. To every brilliant mind overlooked, your time isn't coming. It's here. We're not asking for permission. We're building our own future. The room rose in thunderous applause. 3 generations of change finally coming full circle. If you enjoyed this story, please share and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Meanwhile, I've handpicked 2 more stories you'll love. Have a great day.